So what do a bowsprit, bits, a forepeak, a stem fitting, fiberglass repair, and paint have to do with each other, and why does it matter the order in which we tackle them? Hi, I'm Nika Waters, and welcome to the Boat Galley podcast. I'm talking about our recent corollary to Boat Refit Rule number 1, and the 3 things that are really important when you think about putting everything back onto your boat. Today's episode of the Boat Galley podcast is sponsored by Prism Polish, the ultimate all-in-one metal polish. It cleans, polishes, and protects all in one easy step. Safe for all metals, it is 100% non-toxic and environmentally friendly. Save 10% on your first order at prismpolish.com and using the promo code GALLEY at checkout. Don't wait any longer. Order Prism Polish today and make all your stubborn metal shine like new. Boat Refit Rule number 1 that we came up with when we were dealing with Calypso's stint in the boatyard a couple years ago is that anything you put on your boat will eventually have to come off. Sure, this means pieces of clothing and pieces of gear, but it really is dealing with boat parts. This is to remind us to be careful with sealant selection, to think long and hard about hiding access to important fasteners that should be maintained regularly, to take the time to tape off parts that you don't want to splatter with paint. All of these things are absolutely critical when you're thinking about putting stuff on your boat, from parts to paint to varnish to everything. Anything you put on will eventually have to come off, either you or the person after you who buys the boat. Recently, as we're working on Mischief this summer, this rule has spawned a corollary, which is that any boat part you take off will have to be reinstalled. This has 3 really important aspects to it. And the first is to label absolutely everything. You're taking off the rudder and you're dealing with bolts. Get a used Ziploc that you mark very clearly that says rudder bolts. Even if you're planning on replacing all of those fasteners, if you have that bag that says rudder bolts, you know exactly how many and you know exactly what size you need. You don't need to keep test fitting to make sure that what you're buying will fit into the holes that already exist on your boat. So label everything. We save used Ziplocs. As we use them, we wash them and we reuse them. And then there comes a time when you really can't reuse the Ziplocs for food storage or that sort of thing because they just don't not hold air anymore. They are perfect for this application. Don't throw away those used Ziplocs. The second part of corollary to Boat Refit Rule number 1 is to clean everything. Well, obviously you don't have to clean the fasteners that you're planning on replacing, but cleaning the old sealant off, cleaning up gunk that's there. This is actually easiest done, as weird as it is to say, on the front end of the project. You take the things off, you clean them. Why do it on the front end of the project? You're just busy taking things off. But by the time you're ready to reinstall the part or parts, if you have to pause everything to spend 3 days scraping or sanding or cleaning or whatever, it will feel like a major setback. I am the first to say that removing old Dolphinite or old 5200 or baked on Cetal or a failed epoxy job on the bottom of the keel, it is not sexy. But removing it when you were all excited to start putting the boat back together, it's even less sexy. So clean everything on the front end of the project. And the third piece is to plan everything. I've talked before about the thinking chair being a really important piece of boat gear, perhaps the most important piece in any boat refit. And this is true when you're talking about reinstalling your boat parts. Spend a lot of time planning the timeline. You got to think about what parts of the project you're outsourcing and what any lead time might be for other people. But you also have to think about what parts of the project you're doing yourself and the logical order to make them happen. The time to clean and paint the anchor locker, it's not after you've restowed everything. The time to order new chain plates is not when you're ready to reinstall the rig. So as you've taken everything off and you're labeling everything and you've cleaned everything, you also want to start thinking about the order in which you're going to put things back together. This is something that has come to our minds absolutely in a very, very concrete way right now as we're dealing with a stem chain plate fitting. This fitting that sits right at the water line and serves as the attachment point for the bobstay, it's a robust fitting. And it is kind of a Y-shaped thing with the Y parts on the inside of the hull and the stalk or stem part sticking out of the bow. On Calypso, it's a bronze piece that's bolted through the hull, but on Mischief, it is a stainless Y-shaped piece. On Calypso, it's not Y-shaped. It's just a kind of a regular fitting that through bolts, but on Mischief, it is a stainless Y-shaped piece that is shoved through the hull and then glassed over on the inside to provide the support. Yes, in our opinion, this completely violates rule number 1 because it is a piece that will need occasional inspection and possible replacement. Yes, it's stainless steel, but stainless steel suffers from crevice corrosion. And yeah, if you're going to inspect it, you got to take it out to inspect it, and you can't really do that easily if it's behind fiberglass. But unfortunately, we don't have the time to redo how it's attached, and so we're doing a direct replacement for that stainless steel Y-shaped piece. But hopefully it'll be good for at least 15 years. This one was there for 40 years. Certainly when we took it out, it didn't look particularly good. But so we spent time taking it out, removing the fiberglass, chiseling that out, getting it out. Why does it matter when it's going back in? Well, that fitting is way up in the bow of the boat. It's forward of both the chain pipe and the bitts, which are pieces of wood that go all the way from the keel all the way up and through the deck. And the bitts provide a great place to tie off any lines, but they also serve as an anchoring point for the bowsprit. And we've pulled the bitts out because they needed a lot of love and attention, and that means that the forepeak and that stem fitting is super, super accessible, way more accessible than usual. And we are planning on hiring the yard to do the fiberglass work, including grinding out, because any fiberglass work you're going to do needs to be on clean fiberglass, so all the old paint needs to be ground off. We haven't talked to the yard yet about this plan, so we don't even know if they can do the work on our timeline because of lots of things that have to fall into place to go together. And so if they can't do the fiberglass work, we will likely pivot to quickly doing it ourselves on days when the weather's cool enough to be in the Tyvek suits that we need to be dealing with when you're talking about grinding fiberglass. You want to protect yourself from that stuff as much as you can. And right now, it's supposed to be 95 degrees this week. That's not the time to be in the forepeak in Tyvek suits. So that's fine. That's not a great big deal, but what else is going into this project? Well, the bowsprit. What does it matter? There's a long piece of wood. What does that have to do with a stem fitting and fiberglass and stainless steel and all that stuff? That beautifully refinished bowsprit that Jeremy brought back from a piece of wood that we thought we might have to replace to something we're thinking might be the showcase focus of the boat. It's currently sitting on timbers on the ground, all beautifully finished, but it's taking up real estate that we could easily use for something else that needs refinishing. We'd really love to get that bowsprit back on the boat, both to get it off the ground, but also to free up some space. That bowsprit is fixed in place by the bitts. The bitts can't go back into the boat until the work is done on the bits, but also until the fiberglass work is done. And the fiberglass work can't be done until the new fitting is built. Luckily, we did get the new fitting built. Jeff Carter is brilliant at getting things done quickly, but we had to get the piece out to be able to take it to him so that he could build us a new one. Also, the forepeak was a lovely drab, mold-infested gray paint. We cleaned the forepeak with all the things out of it. And I've actually put 3 coats of bilge coat on all the forepeak surfaces. So they're beautiful and white. And they're also having a lot of good time to cure, to get really hard before anybody has to get in there to do any work. And thank goodness that we thought of painting that before we put everything back on. And yes, once the fiberglass work is done, I will have to go back into that part of the boat and paint over the fiberglass that is covering up our stem fitting. And I'll have to do that painting before the bits go back in. And the bits have to go in before the bowsprit goes back on. Spending some time really planning out how you are going to and when you are going to reinstall boat parts is time well spent. Because sure, we could put the bowsprit back on. We could put the bits back in and have to take them all out again in order to do all the other stuff that has to happen for this project. Boat refit rule number 1, anything you put on you'll have to take out. And boat refit rule number 1, corollary number 1, is anything you take off, you will have to reinstall it. Make sure you make it easier for yourself on the front end by labeling everything, cleaning everything, and planning everything. I can't wait to share an anchorage with you when neither one of us is in a boatyard and we've reinstalled everything that needs to be reinstalled, and we can just toast to our good fortune at being able to live this incredible, special, special life. Thank you so much for listening to the Boat Galley podcast. We love hearing from our listeners. It's been really fun being in the boatyard and having a couple people come up and say, thanks. It's lovely to hear from our listeners. We love it when you share us with your friends. We certainly love it when you let us know things that you really want to hear about or learn more about. And we love it when you don't forget to subscribe, because there are 2 of these every single week. The Boat Galley is all about making boat life better, and we hope that these podcasts help you do that just a little bit at a time. I hope you have the most spectacular week.